Hi, I'm Sean McVay with Sean's Outdoor Adventures, and I want to welcome you to this video on how to be successful hunting on public land. A lot of the ideas that I'm going to share throughout this video can be applied to any hunting situation, but I'm especially going to focus on hunting public land. Public land can be quite challenging because you have so much other hunting pressure that you can encounter. However, if you play your cards right, you really can do well even on public hunting land. Let me give an example. I started hunting this one piece of public land years ago in New York. My very first year hunting there, I did not harvest a deer, and the biggest buck I saw was a spike. The next year I went, I harvested a small buck. The next year I went, I harvested a larger buck and an older doe. Next year I harvested a 4.5-year-old doe, and any deer that's 4.5-year-old, whether it's a buck or doe, is not an easy one to harvest. The next year after that, I harvested this nice buck. The only thing that really changed is my approach to hunting. And as you can see, I got more successful as time went on, and I want to share some of those ideas with you now. One of the first and most important things that I want you to think about is your work ethic. You have to be prepared to put in some legwork. You have to be able and prepared to work hard. You got to get laziness out of your head at the get-go. If you think you're going to park your car and walk a few hundred yards or a few hundred feet and shoot a trophy buck every single year, well, you might be in for a surprise because on public land, there's a good chance you're not going to be able to do that. So one of the first things I encourage you to do is get an aerial photo of the public land you want to hunt. Look at that aerial photo and ask this question: what is the hardest place for a human being to get to? Perhaps there's a river that makes it difficult to access a certain area. Maybe it's just a really far walk from the closest parking area. Maybe the terrain is extremely difficult, making it hard for a human being to reach that area. Now brainstorm. How can I get to that area? Are there areas of the river that are shallow enough I could wear hip waders or chest waders to wade across to get to the other side? Is there a more effective way around the difficult terrain that will still enable me to get there? Am I willing and able to make that long hike? You're already putting yourself in a better situation, areas that are going to receive less hunting pressure, and the deer will be less expecting a hunter in those areas because of how difficult they are to get to. A lot of times that's where your mature bucks are going to be hanging out. However, don't go to one of these areas unless you can do so safely. Always keep safety as your top priority, and always make sure someone knows where you're going to be in case of an emergency so they can come and help you. Another thing you can do is, in addition to looking for isolated areas, look for areas that people will be less likely to hunt. Where's an area that a hunter would not think to go? Is there a really steep hillside? If so, are there any spots where a deer can bed down on that hillside? Sometimes you'll find really steep hillsides with a few main trails that go across them. Now, looking at that steep hillside, where's a good vantage point to maybe get the drop on that deer coming out of a bedding area? Again, keep safety as your top priority. Don't go walking out across those really steep hillsides. Just look for where the deer trails come out of those areas and set up there. It's the same with crossing a stream. Don't cross a deep stream. I personally only cross them when they're about ankle deep and it's very safe. So always, always, always keep safety as your top priority when you're looking at these areas. Or how about real thick areas? So thick that it's hard to walk through. Can you find key trails going in and out of those thick areas? As I talk about these different types of locations to look for, I want to throw this idea in there. When it comes to hunting public land, there's generally a good bit of it available to us. Therefore, I strongly encourage you to set up as many good hunting locations as possible. What I mean is, scout a lot of different public land in your area and have different tree stand locations for every day of the week. I try to only hunt one stand 2 or 3 times an entire hunting season. That way I keep them fresh, I'm constantly rotating, and the deer are not picking up on me when I'm getting in and out of there. So try to have a good selection. Especially this is important because if another hunter moves into one of your areas, that whole spot can be ruined for an entire season or indefinitely as long as that person keeps using it. But that's okay if you have a lot of backup plans. Of course, it goes without saying that you have to identify primary food sources that the deer are going to be using throughout hunting season. However, a lot of locations are dependent on acorns as a primary food source. If you're hunting an area that has acorns as the primary food source, you need to identify in advance if the tree you're expecting the deer to go feed under is producing acorns that year. It might sound obvious, but one year I found a new spot. I was all excited because there's so much deer sign and deer activity under this one tree. There were acorn trees everywhere, but this particular one was like a magnet. They wanted the acorns under this tree more than anything else. I'm all excited. I go to hunt that the next year. Well, that tree wasn't producing that year. There was no deer sign. They weren't coming there at all that year. So here I thought I was going into the season with a guaranteed shot. Not at that spot. The point is, you need to identify in advance if that tree is producing that year. So here's my suggestion. A month before the season, go in there with high-powered binoculars, get under that tree and look all the way up in the top to try to determine if there are acorns in the tree that year. If not, you need to keep looking. What will the deer be eating when the hunting season does come in? I mentioned doing that a month in advance, and this is an important point to keep in mind. Always try to keep minimal impact in your hunting spots. That means when it comes to scouting, get in and get out 1 or 2 times a month before the season and don't go back. Let it cool off. If you don't keep pressuring the area, you won't disturb the deer too much. However, the more you go back, the more they will get sensitive to that area and they will begin to avoid that area. And in that respect, you've already ruined your spot before the hunting season even starts. Well, let's say the hunting season's in and some of the spots you have are not working out. One thing I always do is when I get down from a tree stand, I always try to go a different way out of the woods and scout on my way out. That helps me find new hot spots. In fact, this last season, I was hunting a spot that I had previously scouted. I knew deer were using the area, but when hunting season was in, bear started using that area so much that it pushed the deer out. So I got down from my stand one morning hunt and I scouted a different way on my way out. And I found a nice hot spot. I waited at least a week before going back, and I encourage you, if you find a hot spot on your way out, sometimes it's best to just leave it cool off. If you've walked through there, you don't want to over spook the area. Let it cool off for a week and then go back when the wind is right. Well, for me, I went back a week later and I harvested a really nice buck. And again, this is on public land. So after a morning hunt, when you get down, try to incorporate scouting routines, slow still hunts on your way out to the car. Another thing that I try to do is run trail cameras earlier in the summer, but pull them down a month before the hunting season. Again, it's so that I'm not going in there too close to the hunting season. Another thing is most of your hunters go in scouting a month before the season, so I get my cameras out before I risk them getting stolen by the bulk of the hunting crew that's heading in that area that fall. A lot of times you can pattern deer having these trail cameras run. What I typically do is I put it on 2-3 week cycles. So I'll set up a trail camera and I'll plan on leaving it run for 3 weeks, typically around the end of June, beginning of July. I'll go and inspect the camera, swap out cards, leave it alone for 3 weeks and come back. If I find that the deer are looking at the camera and the camera is spooking them and potentially ruining the spot, I will pull the camera out. I'll either move it somewhere else or take it home completely. Another thing you can do, especially if you're like me and you live in an area with a lot of black bear, is you can try to position the camera up several feet off the ground and angled, pointing it down toward the ground. A lot of times deer will walk past this type of camera and not necessarily look up at it. So if you're pointing it down at a trail, they'll walk right past it without knowing it's there, and the bear will do the same. However, if it's on a lower eye level with them, they're going to spot the camera, and a lot of times the bears are going to rip it right off the tree. Believe me, I've had that happen a lot of times. So in doing this, running trail cameras in this way, I patterned a group of deer, pulled the camera a month and a half before the season, and still harvested this 4.5-year-old doe because the deer were on a pattern, they stayed on a pattern, and I didn't interfere with them. Another thing you can do, especially if you're hunting public land, is constantly scout human beings. Look for tree signs, signs of ground blinds. Watch for people parking in certain areas. On days that I can't hunt, I take a ride past my hunting spots to see if anybody's parked there.
All right, here's a tip for you. I'm not able to hunt this morning, but I'm going to try to get out this evening. Since I have a couple minutes this morning, I'm going to drive to a couple of my areas where I go hunting to see if there's any cars there, and that's going to help me know how much pressure each area is getting, and it'll help me know which area to focus on for tonight. So if one area's got a bunch of cars parked there, I'm not going to go there. Here's one right here at this spot, so I'm going to skip over this one. So there's a truck right there, and that's a tip for you. So if you're ever not able to get out in the morning but you can in the afternoon, or even, you know, if you're not able to get out one weekend but you can the following weekend, still try to take a little trip around to see what's going on. Another option too would be, even if you can't drive past your spots, it'd be have a friend or family member take a ride for you. Just, you know, if they're going to the store, say, hey, do you mind swinging past this spot of mine and let me know if you see any cars parked there, stuff like that. This is especially helpful for those of you who hunt public land like I do.
But let's say you're hunting an area and you're really dead set on harvesting a buck in that particular area and someone else is hunting it. The next thing you can do is begin to say, how will that person's movements impact the deer movement? So if you can pinpoint where that person is setting up and you monitor the wind, how will the deer work the downwind side of that tree stand location? Or how will they escape that area? And when you find that, look for a good setup for you. So now you can set up there and you're actually going to use that person to push the deer to you. One thing you can do to help you establish this kind of an area is you'll need a friend, but send your friend to the area where you're thinking the deer might move to. And then you go as if you were the other hunter and walk into that area, maybe make a little noise, set up. In a sense, you're doing a mock deer drive. You're trying to see where will the deer go to. Will they go to this particular area over here or not? And if you did push deer to your friend, then you know, okay, that is the area where I need to set up. You can do this any time of the year. You can do it in the middle of the summer. You can send your friend to that location. You can walk over to where someone else normally hunts and just see if the deer naturally move to that location. In a sense, you're using that other hunter to do a deer drive. You can also do this on morning hunts. Let's say you have an area you like to hunt in the morning and you know someone else hunts this particular spot. Well, you can position yourself to intercept deer. If the person's walking out of the woods and maybe are pushing deer in a certain way, you can set yourself up to intercept the deer that might get pushed by that hunter. In fact, one of my friends that I grew up with, he went on a hunt one day. He went in the woods around 10 o'clock, got up in the tree stand, and at 11 shot a really nice 8-pointer because some other hunters were deeper in the woods and were walking out and pushed the deer right to him. Another thing I like to do when I'm hunting public land is scout year-round with minimal impact. I'll go in once in a while in certain areas and then I'll stay out. But I especially like to go in after the very first snowfall. If you're in an area and hunt in an area that gets snow, if you can, try to get out in the woods, even if it's not hunting season, right after the first snow. The reason is the deer are still on their regular feeding patterns for the most part, even with that snow just hitting the ground, but you'll be able to see where they're moving to and coming from. It's a great stamp to help you identify where the deer are that time of year. So these are some ideas to help you be particularly successful on hunting public land. There's also lots of scouting tips I give in my How to Scout Whitetail Deer video. I also encourage you to check out my video on how to read topo maps and aerial photos to find hunting hotspots. Both of those videos, along with this, if you put all that information together, it really is going to help a lot of people become a lot more successful in their hunting endeavors. I hope you've been able to pick up a few good tips from this video, and I hope that it helps you be more successful both now and in the future. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I look forward to sharing more videos with you in the future. Take care and God bless.